A horror flick from the producers of The Invisible Man, starring the Hollow Man himself, Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon! Let's get scary footloose up in this bitch! You Should Have Left is brought to us by longtime veteran writer-director David Koepp. That guy. We follow Theo and Susanna, played by Kevin Bacon and Amanda Seyfried, a married couple who, along with their daughter Ella, decide to get away from it all for a while and rent a house in the English countryside. You see, Theo's got some history, and while we don't know what that history is in the beginning of the film, we do find out over the course of the story. What we do know in the beginning is that a lot of people recognize Theo everywhere he goes, and they look at him a bit different, and apparently everyone considers him dangerous. His wife Susanna is an actress, and she'll soon start filming a movie in England. So while waiting on that to start, they decide to get away from it all and go ahead over to England and rent this house out in the middle of nowhere. And of course, not all's right at the house. Shortly after arriving, some weird things start to happen. Secrets come out, paranoia sets in, and a mystery unravels as our characters struggle to survive as they realize that they should have left. I had never even heard of this movie until about maybe 2 weeks ago when the trailer just dropped on the internet out of nowhere. I mean, really, where the fuck did this movie come from? Nobody was talking about it, nobody knew anything about it, and then just all of a sudden, bam, here it is. I think Universal may have dropped the ball a bit on the promotional side of things here. Upon watching that trailer though, I will say that I wasn't very impressed. The movie looked pretty much like any other thriller horror house movie that we've gotten in the past few years. I really wasn't expecting much of anything out of this flick. Probably some okay acting with some decent enough scares with a boring ass plot at best. However, after watching the movie, I am pleased to say that it is actually more than that. It's sold to us as a horror movie, but really this is more of a mystery thriller than a horror. And the mystery is pretty interesting and does keep you guessing until the end. It leaves you wondering throughout the movie if the weird shit that's going on is supernatural or just psychological. There are things that lead to both. It could all be supernatural, or it could just be someone having a fucking psychotic break. You don't really know until the very end, where thankfully the movie does give you all those answers. While I was watching this movie, I was kind of expecting some type of ambiguous ending. Ambiguous endings can work for some films, however not this one. This is a movie that you need the answers in the end. And for whatever reason, that's the feeling I was getting. That they were gonna paint themselves into a corner and give us some cheap ass cop out of an ambiguous ending so that they didn't have to explain what had happened. But I was pleasantly surprised to see that they actually did tie up every single loose end in the movie, and it left me feeling fairly satisfied with the ending. If you watch the trailer to this movie, it kind of leads you to believe there's going to be a whole lot more scares in it. But it's not really. Honestly, there's not a lot in this movie that is very scary. There's some weird shit that happens, but none of it's really scary, or at least I didn't find it scary. I was honestly more interested in the mystery and what was actually going on than anything else. But I do warn you, it takes a little while to get there. This movie takes its time for you to get to know everybody involved, like to really get to know them. I would go as far to call this movie a slow burn, at least up until the final act. But I didn't really have a problem with that. Slow burns don't really bother me as long as there's something going on in the story to keep me entertained during those slower moments. And there was. I thought that the movie had a fairly entertaining story. It's not the most entertaining movie that you'll ever see, but it did keep my attention from beginning to end. The vast majority of the movie is just three characters: Kevin Bacon, Amanda Seyfried, and Avery Essex as their daughter Ella. They all get fairly well rounded out character development. However, Bacon's character Theo does get the majority of it in the film. I did like how the movie didn't just exposition dump information about these characters on you, the viewer. You experience some natural conversations these characters are having, and you pick up things about their past from that. And there are some small little nuances to these characters that did make them a bit more relatable than we typically get in these types of films. Overall, while it was a slow burn, I did enjoy the character development that we got because of that. However, developing good characters with bad performances just doesn't work. Thankfully here, everybody does a fairly good job. Kevin Bacon in particular gives a very convincing and relatable performance, and newcomer Avery Essex does a good job as their young daughter. She was never annoying or too much. She seemed like a kid in this situation. When she was running around playing and just being a kid, it seemed genuine. When the fit hits the shan and she freaks out, it seems pretty fucking genuine that this kid is scared out of her fucking mind. Amanda Seyfried does a good job as well. However, her her chemistry with Bacon isn't quite as good as you would like it to be. It's not awful or anything, but something does seem a little bit off with these characters. Now, there are some things that come up in the story that maybe somebody could say that that's why it seems that way, but I don't think that's all it is. I think this is a chemistry issue. There is some there, just not a whole lot. And while it does detract from the movie a bit, it doesn't totally ruin it or anything. Unfortunately, this lack of chemistry does affect her character more than it does Bacon's, so it makes her performance seem as if it's a bit off. While it does detract from the film, it doesn't necessarily tank the movie or anything. I mean, it's serviceable. From a technical standpoint, this movie's in good hands. David Cope has been making movies for decades, so the guy knows what he's doing. Of particular note is the way that they shot the house. It's really good, and they use very interesting camera techniques to make it all seem extremely confusing, which is a good thing here because that's what our characters are feeling. I don't want to give anything away, but there are times in the movie when things in the house change around, and the way that these scenes are shot is very well done and believable. Also, just the camera work in general. Everything inside of this house feels extremely claustrophobic, and that really helps to add to the tone of the film. Speaking of tone, the tone in this movie really reminded me of David Cope and Kevin Bacon's previous effort together, Stir of Echoes. Not the story or anything, they're nothing alike. However, the tone of Stir of Echoes is very similar to this movie. So if you enjoyed the tone and feel of that movie, there's a good chance that you'll like this one as well. I will say that the biggest downfall to me in this movie was that at times it got a bit cliche. There's some random jump scares and things of that nature that just pop up out of nowhere here. The movie doesn't do like a lot of horror movies do nowadays and just jump scare the shit out of you at every turn or anything, but there are some really out of place jump scares just scattered throughout the film. And while I don't have a problem with a few jump scares here or there, they just seemed very out of place in this movie. Like I said, this is a bit more of a mystery thriller, not so much a horror. So when they just randomly threw in these jump scares just out of nowhere for no reason at all, it just really kind of broke up the tone of that moment. And the vast majority of them, with maybe the exception of one, don't hold any relevance to the story or even what's going on screen at all. So if they had just lost all of them altogether, I think that the tone and the movie would have benefited overall. You Should Have Left was a fairly enjoyable movie. It had solid performances overall, an interesting story with a mystery that keeps you invested, and an overall satisfying ending. And while I don't necessarily think it's worth the rental price that they're asking right now upon release, I do think that once it's available, it's totally worth streaming.
Across the street.
This movie was a good time. It's not perfect and it ain't gonna be on anybody's top 10 list of the year. But once it comes to streaming, if you give it a chance one night, I don't think you'll be disappointed. So there it is, guys, my review of You Should Have Left. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a like. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, stay sexy, whales.
Are you okay?
I mentioned that this movie's tone really reminded me of Stir of Echoes, but there's another movie that reminds me of this one a whole lot more. I don't really want to say what that movie is, because if you know that movie and I say, oh yeah, it's like this one, then it could possibly give away a major plot point to this movie. But I will say that it's a Robert Zemeckis movie that came out around the turn of the century. Once you've watched this one, look back at the guy's filmography, and I think once you see that film, you'll say, oh yeah, that one, and oh yeah, you're right. While they're not exactly the same, I think that they are similar enough, and this one just does a better job at what that one was trying to do. Or who knows, maybe I'm crazy and don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. If you read the comment section of some of my videos, according to some of my viewers, that is a strong possibility.